Jeopardy!
Back to you, Jen.
Restaurants for 400?
You'll really dig the Seattle seafood house called Ivar's Acres of These Shellfish. Jen.
What are clams?
Clams. You dig them.
Hi, welcome to the Doomed Planet podcast. I'm your host, Alex. This is episode 123. The serial killer who murdered Ivar Haglund's mom. And Ivar Haglund, of course, is the wacky entrepreneur and restaurateur and folk singer and prankster who created the Ivar's seafood empire and eventually went on to buy Seattle Smith Tower, that iconic skyscraper that was for a long time the tallest building west of the Mississippi. And the person, definite psychopath who murdered his mom with a starvation diet was Linda Burfield Hazzard. Born in 1867, died in 1938. She was put on trial for her crimes. A lot of people died under her watch. When she got out of jail, she went right back to promoting her starvation diet right up until the end. Dr. Hazzard, by the way, she was not a real doctor. You could get away with stuff like this back then. Wrote a very successful book called Fasting for the Cure of Disease. It's quite a lot of quackery. Starvation occurs when the body is overfed, according to Linda. A couple larger-than-life claims. Mrs. J did a fast under Linda's supervision. That Mrs. J, at end of fast of 34 days, weight 145 pounds. A remarkable reduction of 105 pounds accomplished by my treatment. Enemas are big. Of course, this was a big thing for everyone back then. That's it's so gross, the concept. You stick a tube up your butt and put water up there, and then poop comes out. According to Linda, daily baths and enemata, mechanical accessories for the maintenance of cleanliness and aids to elimination, mark the commencement of the treatment. So her treatment was both starvation and making sure you clean anything out that's up in your alimentary canal. This is an entire book of just complete nonsense. It's hard to believe that she could get anyone to sign up for this. Bowels are filled with witty bilious toxins that poison and re-poison indefinitely unless you do this fasting. It's a public domain book, I'm guessing, and it's there's an introduction. It's been, published as an ebook with an introduction by the author of Starvation Heights, which is the story of Linda and her project. Starvation is a horrible thing. Apparently, it causes great pain, and just suffering through that. It's not like you just get sleepy and you're like, I'm kind of hungry. No, it's extremely painful and torturous. Let's not go too much down the rabbit hole of this incredibly stupid book. Table of contents, fasting, starvation, when and why to fast, preparation for the fast with enemas, of course, the duration of the fast, breaking the fast, and, of course, the enema. Food and disease, rest and elimination, mental and bodily reaction, children in the fast, sexual diseases and the fast, difficulties in conducting the fast, cures by fasting, and of course, as happens so often with her patients, death in the fast. Again, I'd like to acknowledge historylink.org, an invaluable resource for a podcast like ours that often does a dive into Seattle history. This article about Linda Burfield Hazzard is from Catherine Beck from 2006, History Link. Starts out, Dr. Linda Burfield Hazzard was a sadistic and greedy quack who convinced patients that only by starving themselves for months at a time they could regain their health. Unsurprisingly, many of her patients died of starvation. Her sanatorium, in quotes, in the small town of Olalla in Kitsap County, Washington, was nicknamed Starvation Heights by the locals, who sometimes came across skeletal escapees staggering down the road begging for food. Hazzard and her husband, Sam, also had the habit of helping themselves to patients' assets through fraud, forgery, and outright theft. When she was tried for murder in January 1912, the prosecutor called her a financial starvationist and made the case that she intentionally starved her patients to death for monetary gain. So not just a murderer, but, motivated by greed, the worst, basest of human instincts. She had very little training as an osteopath, which is like a junior doctor, an osteopathic nurse, but she did not hesitate to call herself a doctor. She didn't have a degree, but she was licensed to practice medicine in the state of Washington. The digestive system must rest and be cleansed to remove impurities from the body. This could cure anything, from toothache to tuberculosis. Linda appears to have killed her first patient in 1902. At the time, her divorce became final from her first husband. She wasn't held accountable for that. She met and married the man of her dreams then, Samuel Christman Hazzard, West Point graduate who had ruined a promising military career by misappropriating Army funds. And according to History Link, he was a drunk, lecher, and swindler who had been married twice before and hadn't bothered to divorce at least one of the wives when he married Linda. He was put on trial for bigamy and served 2 years in prison for that. Finished his sentence in 1906, and they set out for Washington State to start over. Like so many of us, come get a fresh start out here in the middle of nowhere in Seattle. Linda began practicing in Seattle. Locals, including free thinkers, embraced her medical theories. Seattle is always one to pick up on some weird New Age weird trend, right? One of her first victims was Daisey Maud Haglund, a Norwegian whose immigrant parents once owned Alki Point. They actually bought Alki Point from Doc Maynard, one of the original pioneers who came out here, stole land from the Indians, and platted out Seattle. After a 50-day fast, Haglund died February 26, 1908, at the age of 38. She left behind a 3-year-old son, Ivar. Of course, Ivar Haglund would go on to make a fortune feeding millions of people with his clam restaurants. Seattle Daily Times, 1911, woman MD kills another patient. There's a ton of stuff in old-timey racist newspapers about Linda, which I didn't really get into too much. There's only so much time in the day to research these serial killers. Patients were put up in Seattle hotels or in cabins on Dr. Hazzard's Olalla property. Autopsy reports listed starvation as the cause of death. Unless Linda Hazzard performed the autopsy, in which case anything but starvation would appear as the cause of death. 2 wealthy British hypochondriacs with a large estate, when visiting Victoria, Canada, read an advertisement for Hazzard's book in a Seattle newspaper. They ordered the book, received her brochure promoting her Institute of Natural Therapeutics in Olalla. So they decided to go take the cure, but didn't tell relatives because they thought it would sound weird. And they survived on thin vegetable broth, hours-long enemas, and pummeling massage. And Linda Hazzard began asking about the women's business affairs. They became emaciated and delirious. The sister's childhood nanny received a cryptic telegram summoning her to visit them in Olalla. She set sail from Sydney, Australia, a week later. Sam Hazzard met the boat and took Conway to Linda Hazzard's Seattle office. There, Conway was told that Claire was dead and Dorothea was insane. She was taken to the mortuary and shown an embalmed body she did not recognize as Claire. Gee, that's morbid. Then she was taken to Olalla for a reunion with Dorothea, who was now a human skeleton, living alone in a rough cabin no better than a shack, begging to be taken away. Conway noted that Dr. Hazzard was wearing Claire's silk dressing gown. This Margaret Conway was the childhood nanny that came to rescue the ladies. August 1911, Linda Hazzard was arrested, and then you have a bunch of newspaper articles following this sensational trial. Her lawyer wisely kept her off the stand. This is incredible. Dr. Hazzard had her defenders, according to HistoryLink, including loyal staff members and patients. John Ivar Haglund, Ivar's father, testified that even though his wife Daisy had been Hazzard's first Washington victim, he had faith in Dr. Hazzard and had taken his little boy Ivar to her for treatment 3 times a week, even after his wife's death. That can't be real. So little Ivar, who grew into kind of a pudgy, sort of alcoholic old guy, was going 3 times a week to get enemas from a serial killer. Imagine thinking about that next time you go to Ivar's, a chain that still exists, and you're munching down on those deep-fried, scrod or cod or pollock. The weird thing, I digress, about Ivar's clams and the whole publicity about clams, and it's a clam place. The best clams come on the east coast of the United States. Out here, we just have those tiny Asian manila clams or the big giant gooey duck clams. You also have horse clams, or they're otherwise known as butter clams. Those are really rubbery, and I would not want to eat those, even if they were tenderized and fried.
And now a word from our sponsor.
We're fishermen, and we're here to say you gotta eat your seafood every day. Clams and scallops.
Salmon, too. Prawns and oysters, they're good for you.
We bring them in fresh, and that ain't hey.
You should have seen the van that got away.
So if you're smart, like we know you are,
You go to Ivar's restaurants and seafood bars.
then we say Ivar's food is fine.
We ain't just handing you some fishing line. We're the Ivar's crew, and we're here to say you gotta eat your seafood every day.
So Hazzard killed 2 more patients while awaiting sentencing. She got out of jail and went right back to starving people to death, and then her sanatorium burned down in 1935, and she died in 1938. She hadn't been feeling well and had embarked on a fasting cure, so killed by her own cure. Geez, it's always these creeps from the Midwest that come out to Seattle to become serial killers, like Howard Schultz from Chicago. Gary Ridgway, was he a native son, or is he from the Midwest? Kind of imagine he's from Gary, Indiana. Linda Hazzard married some guy at age 18 and had 2 kids. She decided fasting was her life's work. She left her husband, moved from a small rural area in Minnesota to Minneapolis, married Sam Hazzard. She's the starvation doctor. Sentenced to 2 to 20 years of hard labor for killing at least 15 people for financial gain. But she didn't stay in jail that long. They let her out. Luckily, she killed herself. Okay, this is kind of sick. This is well covered, this lady. I am surprised there's not a documentary film. Maybe there's some Discovery Channel cheap shit documentary. Or I'm surprised there's not like a horror film, a fiction horror film about this lady. I guess it's just too much of a bummer, the story. So on March 28th, 1910, Earl Edward Erdman, a civil engineer with the city of Seattle, died of starvation. He had kept a diary detailing Hazzard's treatment of him during the preceding weeks. February 1st, saw Dr. Hazzard and began treatment. No breakfast. Mashed soup dinner and mashed soup supper. February 5 through 7, 1 orange for breakfast. Mashed soup dinner, mashed soup supper. Okay, you get the idea here. February 13th, 2 oranges for breakfast. No dinner and no supper. February 14th, 1 cup of strained tomato broth at 6 p.m. February 20th, 8 strained juice of 2 small oranges at 10 a.m. Dizzy all day. 2 small oranges again at 5 p.m. February 21st, 1 cup of settled and strained tomato broth and backache today, just below the ribs. February 24th, slept better Wednesday night, kind of frontal headache in the a.m. 2 small oranges in the a.m. Ate 1.5 cups hot tomato soup at 6 p.m. Heart hit up to 95 beats per minute and sweat considerable. Okay, the dude is dying. February 26th, did not sleep so well Friday night. Pain in the right side. Tomato broth, oranges. It's horrifying. At this point, if you're starving that bad, your brain is atrophying and you don't even realize what's happening. Again, the diet continued until he was hospitalized on March 28th, and he died that afternoon. And Hazzard, deaths attributed to Hazzard. Lenora Wilcox, Daisey Haglund, of course. Her official cause of death, by the way, Ivar's mom, was stomach cancer, which would have caused her to starve to death, apparently. Well, okay. Blanche Tyndall, Viola Heaton, Eugene Stanley Wakelin died from a bullet in the head on Hazzard's property. No one knows what exactly happened there. So I guess we'll move from a repulsive serial killer, just a freak, to a jolly, happy guy that brought joy and deep-fried fish to millions. Ivar Haglund, born in 1905. And again, his mom was murdered by the starvation doctor and died in 1985. So good long life. Seattle character, folk singer, restaurateur, king of the waterfront, mayor and patriarch of the waterfront. This is from History Link. Our friends there, Paul Dorpat, Seattle historian, wrote this piece. Again, his parents were pioneers who bought Alki Point from Doc Maynard. So this goes way back. And again, they had some money, apparently. So he was a folk singer. He's also friends with Mark Toby, one of the artists of the Northwest School and a well-respected internationally as an artist. Ivar set up Seattle's first aquarium. Animal rights were not a thing, though, so God knows what was happening there. And that was in 1938. He had a seal that was doing publicity stunts with him. Came up with fun names for animals. Herman the Hermit Crab. Oscar and Olivia Octopus. And started opening restaurants. Closed the aquarium in 1956. Acres of Clams, his first restaurant in 1946. Ivar was the king of puns, both good and bad. Cultured clam was turned into clam culture, and his motto, "Keep Clam," became a long-time advertising slogan that lasted well after his death. He loved publicity stunts. He made a stamp out of a clam stamp that he printed up, and the post office confiscated the stamp. It did look like a U.S. postage stamp. Emmett Watson, journalist and another Seattle character, 1963 followed Ivar through his work day. That started with lunch and he called it quits at 2:30 p.m. He was a drinker. I just can tell that. Neighbors at the waterfront complained about all the seagulls. Who has not been to Ivar's and had a seagull or crow steal one of your French fries? And again, the place is not bad, deep fried stuff that's pre-frozen and whatever. You add tartar sauce and ketchup, and the great syrup spill. He's really a publicity genius here. Most of Ivar's pranks and promotions were designed, but one of his best came by good fortune and artful timing. There's railroad tracks right on the waterfront there. They're still there in Seattle. A tank car hose broke and squirted 1,000 gallons of syrup onto the railroad tracks across Alaskan Way from acres of clams. Ivar rushed to the spill with a big spoon and joyfully scooped the free sweetener onto a plateful of pancakes he had prepared in the acres of clams kitchen. People love that. That hit newspapers all over the country. Clam eating contest. He began selling the stamps in his restaurant. He buys Pier 54 in Seattle and opens Ivar's Salmon House, which is a fancier restaurant, kind of designed to look like an Indian longhouse. And amazingly, in 1976, he bought the Smith Tower. This is an incredibly beautiful building, once the tallest tower east of the Mississippi. And I guess in 1976, Seattle is down in the dumps. And this guy that owns a couple fucking fish and chip shops is buying the place. The Smith Tower still on hard times until recently, one of the last buildings in the country to have elevator operators. What I like about it, I've been there many times, including in the very top it's just now a penthouse at the very top of the tower. And then you can climb up into this little orb at the very top, which I did, and I was terrified. One thing I liked about the building is the windows open, which is unlike most or all modern, horrible office buildings where you're trapped with recirculated air. So if you have your law office is on the 20th floor or whatever, you can open your window and all that beautiful sea air is getting sucked in. Ivar died at he was 79 in 1985. And wow, 5 years before I arrived in Seattle. No regrets, but if I had grown up in Seattle, I would absolutely have sought out this guy and tried to meet him. All right, so Ivar, great life. His mom was murdered by a starvation diet serial killer, but, those are the breaks. That just makes you stronger when something horrible like that happens. This has been yet another episode of the Doomed Planet podcast.
Find out more at doomedplanet.com. Goodbye.